Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Filmstudy. This is Ken McCusick. Here today with my friend Dan Rees. Dan, how you doing?
Doing great. How about you?
Always fun to do a pod with you, my friend. And we got a topic that I think is right up your alley. And I harken back to last year's draft. And you were handling a lot of these trade value exchanges that were coming up. And literally, like every single one, it seemed like you were able to predict exactly what the other team would get back because they follow the JJ chart so closely.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how all the teams seem to still be following that. There's other charts out there, but that still seems to be pretty popular.
It does, and it's like, well, they're getting a fifth in return for this because that's the difference between the value of these two things. It's very cool. There weren't a lot this last year. There weren't a lot of next year's picks being traded. There wasn't a lot of that. There was some. The Ravens traded I think it was their sixth round pick to pick up the extra seventh that maybe got them Geno Stone.
I think that sounds right. Yeah.
There was a little bit of that, but not too much. But anyway, we're going to have a little bit of that come up in this discussion today, which is a hot topic now in Baltimore, which is the trade value that the Ravens should get if they decide Orlando Brown has to go. And obviously, we don't want to see him go. Been a good lineman for the Ravens, been a good right tackle, filled in at left tackle, I thought, very well this year.
Yeah, good flexibility, good guy. It seems like real great storyline. It's unfortunate that this story has come up, but if that's his interest, then we got to look what's best for both sides. So
sure. So, in a way, I think he's had his chance to play left tackle here. The Ravens have already showcased him for a potential contract, even if he goes back to right tackle this year and plays well again, as we would expect him to. I think other teams would still look to sign him as a left tackle after 2021, but it does make sense also that he'd want to get a contract now, a long-term deal right now, set with some guaranteed money in it immediately. And there's probably a few teams around the league who can do that, but it's much fewer than in a typical year.
Yeah, definitely. There's you can arrange it so that the first year stays about the same, and then you won't hit until 2022. So I think there are a decent number that could figure it out. So,
all right. Well, there a lot of people when they approach something like this, and this is a lot of Twitter and whatnot, but it's a lot of sports fans in general. Look at say we can't trade Orlando Brown for anything less than a number one pick because, my God, he's so great. He's Orlando Brown. And they don't really take in the primary concerns, which are really the seniority of the player, where they are on the pay scale now relative to value relative to cap, I'll call it. And also then when they're going to get paid big money, which in Brown's case is next year, such that they're no longer that same sort of value relative to the cap. Still a good player, no doubt about that, but we just won't be the same value in 2022 as he is in 2021.
Right, absolutely.
All right. So what I would say is we need to look at Brown from three perspectives for the Ravens. The first is, what is the value of his 2021 cap-friendly contract, where he's only going to make $3.6 million in 2021, absurdly low for a quality left tackle. Very low also for any offensive line starter, but very low for a quality right tackle as well. So, that alone is a large portion of Orlando Brown's trade value. Beyond that, there's incremental value. There's the option to retain Brown under the franchise tag in 2022. So that has some amount of value. And we'll talk about maybe what that is in relation to that cap value. But the option to retain him under the franchise tag could have cap and trade consequences. It could just be you want to solve your long-term problem, and Orlando Brown is a great guy to do it at left tackle, and you can pay him the big money, and you're happy doing that, just like the Ravens did with Ronnie Stanley last year.
Yep. Those are both the keys. Yep.
Both elements of value. Okay. And then the third thing is the Ravens, if they don't trade Brown, should get a compensatory pick for losing him after 2021 that will not come until 2023. Given the way the compensatory picks rule. Now, it's not a sure thing that would be a third round pick. It's not even a sure thing the Ravens would have a compensatory pick net positive or net loss, I'll say, in order to generate compensatory picks, but it's likely. that they would get a competitor, because that's the way the Ravens play it. They are very careful with their marginal free agents to make sure they don't sign outside guys to endanger their compensatory pick situation. And they're also entering a year in 2022 where they'll have one of the creamiest looking free agent crops that's ever existed, all come and due at the same time.
Yeah, and they'll be especially careful if they knew they had a third coming. So, it'd be one thing if they had a seventh, but especially a third.
Yep, absolutely. So let's take a look at the value of those individual components. And I'm going to start with what I think is the easiest part, which is the value of that comp pick. All right, so let's really take a look at that. I'm going to assume, and we're throwing some things out there, that Brown is the 6th compensatory pick of round 3. Okay, so that would make him pick number 102. Yes, 102. That's correct. I had this. I didn't type it into the notes. I had to apologize for that. But 102 in the whole draft, which gives him a JJ chart value of 92. Is that what you work out on that? You're looking at the JJ chart value, I'm sure?
Yeah. The one I'm looking at doesn't have the comps in it, but that seems right. So
it's just number 102.
Yep, 102. Yep. 92. Yep.
And you do have to be careful about that, by the way. You bring up a great point, because we're going to have coach picks and we're going to have other comp picks go in, and you could get 12 extra draft picks stuffed in between round 3 and round 4, which means that round 4 pick is worth a lot less than it used to be, or somewhat less.
Yep, definitely.
All righty. So if it had a chart value of 92, that's nice, but you don't get that value until the 2023 draft, and we're trading him now. So, the Ravens would want value in the 2021 draft. So you have to kind of ask yourself, what is that 92 points of JJ value worth in terms of 2021? And obviously, when you trade a pick this year and you return one next year, you expect to get an increment of value. So you'd have to discount that 92 back to the present, back to the 2021 draft. And I think I could live with a lot of reasonable 2-year discountings on this, but I think between 55 and 70% somewhere might be reasonable. Some might say 64% because it's a 80% 2 years kind of thing. There's some other elements to that. The Ravens might not actually end up with a 3rd round pick. Brown could underperform and only be a 4th or 5th round comp pick. You get hurt. Things can happen. I think we're putting a fairly optimistic value on it, frankly, to say 92 is the baseline and then discount from there. But I'd say, reasonably speaking, I think that has a value of about 60 if you discount it to about 65% of its original value.
Yeah, the one concern I have about that is, some people adjust, or I've heard the way to adjust the JJ for a year is just kind of moving a rope or a column back in rounds. Mm-hmm. That seems a little bit extreme to me, especially with, that may apply when you're talking round 5, 6, 7, but I don't really see a 3 jumping all the way to a 5 in value. So, I think 60 seems reasonable, but it could be a little high.
So we're effectively dropping the value from 102 to 117.
Okay.
Do you agree with that in your chart? Take a look. That's what I looked at. If the 102nd pick is worth 92 and 117 is worth about 60.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
So we're dropping that. We're discounting it by effectively about 15 picks. I think I would agree with the logic more if you're actually trading the pick. So if the Ravens are actually giving this pick up now to gain that pick later, and they are notionally, but it's not actually being exchanged, that you tend to discount that by more because everybody thinks their bird in the hand is kind of worth more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So anyway, I'm gonna say 60 is reasonable. When we get into the total value, the 60 is not the major part of the component.
Yep.
Major component of the whole value. So let's talk about the rest of it. So the big other element, of course, is what is Brown's 4th year worth? And that's the bulk of his value, is how much is his season in 2021 worth relative to cap? And if he has, you could do multiple ways of doing this, but the one I went with is, let's look back at the 2018 draft and now reevaluate Brown for who he really is, which is about the in my mind, about the 16th best player in the draft. We'll talk about how I got there first. I looked at the entire draft and I ordered them by career approximate value which is on the PFR site. Now, it's not the only means, and it's not even really a great means. It definitely overweights what he's done in terms of Pro Bowls, and the Ravens offense led by Lamar Jackson has certainly had a big hand in inflating that number, because a certain percentage automatically gets ascribed to the offensive line. But Brown is the 8th highest in terms of value from that draft. And let me just read the names off. So Lamar Jackson is number 1 at 48, then Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard at 42. Minkah Fitzpatrick at 36. Boy, it looks like the Steelers made a pretty freaking good trade there. Gotta say, Josh Allen is number 5 at 35. Tremaine Edwards at number 6, 33. And Fred Warner tied with him at 33. Then Orlando Brown alone at 32 is number 8. The rest of the list, then, still a whole bunch of great players. Baker Mayfield, Roquan Smith of the Bears, DJ Moore, Nick Chubb, Calvin Ridley, Mark Andrews at number 14. By the way, if you didn't like Ozzy's last draft, consider the fact the Ravens got the 1st, 8th, and 14th highest 3-year values out of that draft, and I think you gotta like it that much more.
Yeah, that's not bad.
After him is Saquon Barkley. Then a bunch of tackles: Mike McGlinchey, Colton Miller, Brian O'Neill, Frank Ragnow, the center, Braden Smith, Daron Payne, et cetera, et cetera. We won't go all the way down the list here, but it's a hell of a lot of good players, even as you go down further. And I think I couldn't see putting Orlando Brown any higher than the 8th best player in that group, but I could see dropping him some, and so I did. I said, okay, let's say he was the 16th best player in that draft. How would we have valued him?
Yeah, I think that's fair. You know, you take out some of the Pro Bowl weighting, you take out some of the Lamar weighting, like you said, but then he gets a little bit more because of positional value, especially moving from right tackle to left tackle. That's increased positional value. So, you know, I think that's fair. You know, maybe even on a little bit conservative approach. So.
Right. And I guess I think that the notion is to be conservative. We're going to have some aggression coming up in this as we'll see. But anyway, that the 16th pick has a nice even value of 1,000 on the JJ chart. We in agreement on that?
Yep.
Okay. So now I said, okay, that is effectively the draft capital you use to get an advantage relative to the cap for 4 seasons. Okay, and I know it's the 16th overall picks. There would be a 5th-year option if he were actually fifth round, a first round pick, but he wasn't. So I can't really do that. Plus, the first-year option would cost, the 5th-year option would cost more in terms of salary. So I'm just going to say, notionally, I would expect about 1/3 of his value relative to cap to come in year 4. A typical player is going to have some improvement in his first 4 years, and a good player like Brown is also going to have an increase in salary that underlies under the PPE or the PPP program. I forget which is, but the pay for play program that the NFL has that has already bumped his salary up to $3.6 million. He didn't sign originally for that.
Right. Yeah. I think 1/3 versus the straight line 1/4 makes sense with the player improvement. Yep. I think
that would shave some. So I'm actually taking a steeper curve of improvement over that period because there's a shaving for the additional
PPE. Yep. Player performance escalator or something like that. Yep.
There you go. So we got PPEs and masks.
Yeah. It's all over the place this year.
All right. So if I do that and I say 1/3 of his value in year 4, then I can take 333 JJ points and ascribe it to this year. 1/3 of his 1,000.
Yep.
Then I'm gonna do one more thing. I'm gonna say the market frictions, which could give him incremental value, have some small additional amount. So the fact that the Ravens could tag Orlando Brown after 2021, if he has a monster year again, and would be a left tackle that anybody would want, then they could tag him and they could trade him then, or they could tag him and they could keep him if something happened to Ronnie Stanley, say. But they would have multiple options, and I'm going to put some small incremental value in there, but I don't honestly think that's all that high. I rounded his value up for year 4 up to 350 based on the franchise tag value and tag and trade components of that might exist after 2021. Hey, would you ascribe a different value to that? Do you think you would go higher or lower than 17 incremental JJ points on that?
I think I'd go higher, and that's just because the O line. I believe the franchise is all the way across the board the same
Hmm?
value. So if we were talking to left tackle franchise tag, you're getting a pretty good value based off of that. I think it's only like 14 million or something like that this year. So you're getting a pretty good value for a franchise tag for the left tackle when you use the whole O line. So I think it's actually a little bit more valuable, but I think it's reasonable.
Okay, well, a good point, and it may be reasonable that should have another 20 or 30 points in there. I wouldn't object. What would be your range there? Would you increase it by how much? I really trust your perspective on this, your professional background or whatnot, but how would you adjust that?
Let's see. Yeah, I think something like a 10% load would be fine. I think, which is 35 or 33. So, I think anything up to that is reasonable. So,
okay, so you put it at 370 and I put it at 350. The point is that there's not that much difference in that range.
Agreed. Yep.
We're in a fairly narrow range there. Okay, so terrific. So we'll move forward on this because there's still another component to figure out.
You need support, someone to help you start something new, help you see what's possible. For more than 30 years, busy adult students have trusted Indiana Wesleyan University with their dreams. IWU partners with you wherever you are in your journey to offer you flexible, affordable, career-focused education. You know why you want to earn a degree. IWU knows how to get you there. Learn more about available financial aid and see a complete list of more than 100 online academic programs at iwueducation.com.
This year has reminded us of the importance of saving for the unexpected. And as a bank, our job is to make that a little easier for everyone. That's why at Huntington, we're so proud to introduce Money Scout. It analyzes your checking account to find money that's not being used and moves it to your savings automatically. It's that simple, so you can always be saving, even now. Learn more and enroll at huntington.com/moneyscout. Huntington, welcome. Money Scout is subject to eligibility, terms and conditions, and other account agreements. Member FDIC.
And that is that if I add those two pieces together, 350 and 60 for the original comp pick value, I get 410 as a value for Brown. But I think that really is more of a view of what he's worth to the Ravens as opposed to what he's worth to another team. So another team can say, Brown is the last piece we need to fix our offensive line, particularly if we can stuff him in at left tackle when the Ravens are going to waste him at right tackle. And we can not only fix it for this year, but we don't have any significant draft capital coming up or any real good option to get a good left tackle in the coming years because we're drafting 23rd or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has more value to us. And that's where I think DaCosta really comes in and needs to get between a 25 to a 50% premium on that 410 points. So I would look for him to get, and I'm just rounding again, between 500 and 600 points of 2021 JJ value for that. So if I take 400, I round that up by 25%, I get to 500. If I round it up by 50%, I get to 600. I think that's the real range that the Ravens should be shooting for in terms of what they get for Orlando Brown. And if they get an offer like that, from my perspective, I think they'd have a hard time passing it up.
Yep. And so 500 to 600 JJ values, that ends up, what is it? Looks like 31 to 40.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's exactly what I came up with. So that's the range I'm thinking. So the Ravens should get between the 31st and the 40th pick. They have other options. There's some trade partners. You don't have to get that all in a first round pick. You can get it in a couple of later round picks,
Sure,
or something. But they also have an exchange of firsts with some incremental change would be possible. I've heard of the Los Angeles Chargers as a potential destination. If you went to the Chargers, they have the 13th overall pick, which is worth 11 something. You have the number.
The 13 overall. Let's see. That is 1150.
And the
Ravens is 680. So yeah, that'd be about like what is that? 470. So they'd still owe us a little bit. Little something. So on top,
maybe that with a fourth or even a late third would be reasonable. Late third, early fourth would be a good exchange. So exchange ones and then toss in either a 3 or a 4.
Yep.
That's the kind of trade I'm looking for the Ravens to make. I don't think they have to, beat beat the other team as badly as they, have on some trades in the past. I think this is a real opportunity for the Ravens to get more value than what they probably think they have in Brown right now. And particularly since they, by signing Stanley, have eliminated any reasonable chance of them realizing Brown's left tackle value. I think it actually makes sense for both sides to part ways, for the Ravens to trade Brown under these circumstances to another team for which he'd have more value.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So one other question I had for you is, do you think he gets an increase at all for relative to some of the draft pick value for being a known quantity? We've calculated these based off of his value now. You get, his value out to be the 32nd pick. The 32nd pick could be a bust. So do you think the fact that for pretty close to 100% certainty he's going to be a good left tackle adds even more value?
I think you could make that argument, certainly, and that I would toss that in the 25 to 50% increment group. That's where DaCosta has to convince another team that's really true. I think the main thing of this is it's 1 year of Brown versus 4 years of that guy that the Ravens might draft at number 31.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I'd look at it. So, we're always trying to beat the cap. The Ravens have a big problem that all of their 2018 contracts come due at the same time, and they're all a bunch of players they want to keep. I mean, Lamar Jackson, Orlando Brown, Mark Andrews, Deshaun Elliott, Bradley Bozeman, and Anthony Averett. I know they'd like to keep every single one of those guys. And it's just not going to be possible given that the stack of contracts and the alignment of those contracts is dangerously similar in terms of creating problems for the cap here, and also in terms of the escalation of that, the pig through the python, as we would talk about in actuarial terms, of that salary cap increasing on each of those individual contracts throughout their coextensive lives.
Yep, absolutely. So this kind of takes one off of that list and kind of throws a rookie contract in there to help out a little bit. So it definitely would make sense from the salary cap perspective for the Ravens. So
it's amazing. I mean, James Hurst really began, I think, the unstacking of this contract set with the trade last year. And I didn't like it originally. I didn't really think it was great value. But then I thought, you know what? It's not bad considering the fact that they really needed to do work to unstack this. They traded Kenny Young, of course, during 2019. They released Zach Sealer during 2019. He all of a sudden is a really good player. They've got 9 starters from that freaking draft, and it's just amazing. The Ravens benefited from 8 of those in terms of value they've got out of it. They did not benefit from Sealer. That was really unfortunate, but they did benefit from everyone else.
Yeah, I think it was a great final draft and pretty amazing results. And I think with Brown, you could get some good value here. Part well, kind of like they did with Peyton Hurst, on good terms, and both sides can be happy about it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit sad with the way this has kind of come out through the media. Do you think there's any possibility that Brown has reduced his own trade value with the I'm a left tackle discussion? Because, I mean, we look at the Ravens as trading from a position of strength because they can plug Brown back in at right tackle for 1 year, get real good value, or they could trade him to somebody else who could realize left tackle value for him. And I would understand why Brown would want it. I'd understand why the Ravens want to harvest that value of somebody else using him at left tackle.
Yeah, I think other teams, there's enough teams that need a left tackle that I don't think they would be looking at him, to be a right tackle with some left tackle backup flexibility. A lot of people will be looking at him to sign him as a left tackle purely. So I don't think him saying I'm a left tackle will discourage any of the other teams. When we look at that message as fans, it kind of upsets us because it's kind of going against the team mentality and things like that. But I'm not sure when you're the team that's getting him that has the same impact. You can kind of argue through that pretty easily. He wants to do this for his family, himself, money. There's just so many reasons that why you could argue that it's a valid stance that I don't think it will detract any from the teams that are interested in getting a left tackle.
My concern isn't that it detracts in their interest in getting Brown. I think all the teams that need a left tackle want Brown. My concern is that it's going to allow other teams to twist DaCosta's arm in an unfamiliar way because they think Brown has to go from the Ravens' perspective. I don't think he does.
Oh no. I don't think he has much leverage. One of the big things that came out in the recent CBA is that players can't hold out anymore. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. You would just the next year would count as your fourth year. So he has no leverage in like not being able to holding out a year and then signing with someone else. He would still be on the hook for one more year with the Ravens. And it's not like he's going to play poorly not try hard because he still wants to get a big contract. So
counterproductive, shoot yourself in the foot. Yep. We have seen things today, and I don't know, it was Schefter or one of the other national guys who basically said Brown says he won't play anything but left tackle, kind of thing. And he doesn't have that ability. He certainly shouldn't. Right. And Jared Gaither is a case in point of a guy who basically destroyed what could have been a very good career by an attitude that was terrible. I don't think Orlando Brown is in any real danger of having that. But it's the kind of thing. If I were Brown, I would say, don't quote me like that. Look, I know you're trying to help me or you're trying to get an inside scoop and you want to say, I'll only play left tackle, but you're not helping me. You're actually hurting me by saying that nationally. And I think that, it certainly is hurting the Ravens. Brown has been let loose to make his own deal. I don't know exactly what that means, but it may mean that his agent is going around and asking other teams, what would you give in terms of draft compensation for Orlando Brown? And then recanting that recanting is the wrong word, reiterating.
Yeah. Relaying it over to him. Yep.
Yeah. To the Ravens. But I honestly don't know what that exactly entails when a player is free to seek his own trade.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's allowed to talk about future contracts with that other team. Like, we'd be willing to sign that extension. So, because I think with 1 year left, you want to be able to be comfortable that you're not giving the player all the leverage for the next contract.
So the good thing about Brown is that he's still got a franchise tag here. So it may be that franchise tag value has more value to a different team than to the Baltimore Ravens, because the Ravens probably won't use it with their big stack of 2018 or 2022 contracts coming due, but another team might.
Yep.
And so it could definitely have more value to them.
Especially if it gives them another year to negotiate the long-term contract. So, yep.
Yeah, and get the first year at the most favorable level, you're saying, right?
Yep.
Okay. Dan, always a pleasure to talk football with you. I love having these kind of discussions with you because you definitely think in these very creative mathematical terms about value and how to look at the problem. Thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was. We'll see. Interesting what happens here. So,
all right. We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.